Okay, so as you may be aware, the project that I've been developing, so I guess it started from when I did my PhD quite a few years ago now. And when I did do my PhD, which focused on children's spelling and their writing and how spelling in particular impacts their writing, I developed the components of spelling test as a real word spelling test. It's a 70-word dictation test. And I know some of you are familiar with that assessment. You use it already. But for those of you who aren't familiar with it, I thought I'd quickly go through an overview of what that assessment is first. And it's basically a 70-word dictation test that teachers can administer to the class of students at one time. When I did my PhD, it was a pen and paper test, and it uses an error analysis method to score the students' responses. So even though there are 70 words, there are 101 individual linguistic word level items that are analysed. And through the research, I've been able to demonstrate that it is a statistically valid and reliable assessment tool, and I was able to develop Australian norms using that assessment. So, for example, it is internally consistent, so it's sort of reliably measuring what we set out to measure in terms of students' spelling, and it is also highly correlated with NAPLAN spelling. Since then, I developed a pseudo-word version of that, and so it works in a similar way. Although that one is more 3 separate assessments, one that looks at phonological applications in spelling, orthographic and morphological, and that's also gone through validity reliability testing. And so over the years, I've collated all of that with some instructional recommendations into this manual, which is a spiral-bound book that many schools are using across Australia. I might also add that it has been also used through research in the UK as well. And so I have gone through the process of analysing thousands of students' spelling errors, and I know how time-consuming that is, albeit very rich information for instructional purposes. So I was able to develop an online platform for both the components of spelling test for 3 to 6, which is the one I'm talking about, and I've also developed one for the early years as well. And that online platform provides the error analysis automatically, saving a huge amount of time. And those errors, the scores based on the error analysis, are then mapped onto colour-coded instructional recommendations. And those codes look a little bit like this. I'm just going to very briefly share a couple of pages from the CoST manual. So items in the test are allocated to a particular category, and they are labelled, so, P1, P2, P3. So you can see from error analysis data what sorts of errors the students might be making. And the teachers get a spreadsheet that provides colour-coded instructional recommendations along with the actual Australian normed data, and so raw scores and normed data as well. And so then they go into the manual to have a look at the sorts of activities that they might do. I'll just flip through a few pages, and there are printable activities in here that can be used already. So there's lots of pages of activities that over the years have been really helpful for teachers. And a few years ago, I conducted an intervention study, a randomised control study that's been published in a peer-reviewed journal. And in that particular study, the teachers who were involved in the intervention followed this approach where they used the error analysis data to inform their teaching. And then from that, they were able to so I just realised that I wasn't even sharing my screen just then. So I might need to just try that again. Can someone give me the heads up or thumbs up or something whether or not you saw that document? Because I have a feeling I didn't actually share. No. Okay. Thank you so much for letting me know. I will try that again. I apologise for that. I'm just going to share that again, just so that you have a quick snapshot of what's in the actual manual itself. So bear with me and I'll get that back up again. So going back to the intervention study, the teachers who were involved in the intervention used error analysis data from the components of spelling test to identify the sorts of errors that the students are making, and then they used the activities in there to develop some lessons and implement a very explicit sort of structured approach to teaching spelling. But as part of that, what I found was the teachers were still really needing a lot of my instructional support, and in terms of a research project that involved the fidelity to make sure that they were implementing it as I had intended. They were engaged in some professional learning with me, but also ongoing support. So not just by me, but at the school level with executive staff. And that involved, helping them with lesson planning and reflecting on their lessons and so on. So you're just getting a snapshot here of what's in the manual in case you haven't seen it before. It's about 300 pages in there. There's information about how to administer the test and how to score the analysis if you were to do it manually. It has all the norms as well. So it's got all the technical information in here that you need, as well as printable activities. So here are the codes that I was telling you about. So if a student scores poorly for P4, you can go to the section in the manual that tells you what sorts of things you could do to support that student for that aspect of spelling. And there are orthographic and morphological codes as well. So the rest of the manual has a whole range of, printable activities that you can do. I'm just scanning it very quickly so you can get a quick snapshot of what's in here. And so this has been very helpful for teachers. But what I did find, and even in the intervention study, even though the teachers who were involved in the intervention showed that what they were doing made statistically significant improvements in their students' spelling scores compared to the business as usual approach, which involved a lot of ad hoc, or in some cases no instruction at all, a little bit of phonics in the mix, but not very much. Certainly no instruction in morphology. There was no use of error analysis, so judgments were made in a very ad hoc manner. So I found that basically teachers who do have that strong linguistic knowledge and also strong knowledge of their students, robust pedagogical content knowledge, are more likely to make a difference in the classroom. So this resource has really helped many schools, but I thought, how can I make it even better? So I've now developed this online platform. I'll stop sharing this now. And so if the class already has the manual and they are going to use the online test to get the results, and they get that as a spreadsheet, they can, as of the start of next year, they'll be able to access this new teacher dashboard, which I have been working on. The teacher dashboard is currently being trialled for user testing by a range of a number of schools at the moment, and they're very kindly going to give me some feedback on it soon. But I'm going to share with you, I'm just logging in right now because it times out.
So I do want to have it in school workshops for the 2 days for making a fair one if they're happy, because Robin needs to do it, science going needs to do it.
Needs to
Kate
mute your voice,
in a job, she'll need to do it. And I thought we could get other schools in, because I think it also showcases.
Okay, got that. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen now, and you'll be able to see what this teacher dashboard looks like. It's the Components of Spelling teacher dashboard. So once the students have completed the test online, the school then receives the report that has all of the error analysis like they normally would in Excel. And in addition to that, they'll have the option to access this as well. So if they go into the portal, the first thing they'll see is their class list. And then they'll be able to access a summary of the Components of Spelling test results, not the full analysis report, just the summary here. They'll also then, like I said, be able to download the actual Excel report. So it has all the students listed here, how many of the words, 70 words they submitted were correct. And then they'll have their raw scores here that show, for example, out of the 31 phonological items, how many did they get correct? The same thing with orthography and morphology and the total score. And these are all color-coded to give you a brief snapshot of where the students are at. But then the exciting part for me is the tailored activities, which are differentiated based on the raw scores from the error analysis. So if you click here where it says tailored activities, you'll see the 3 components based around the Components of Spelling test. So the error analysis is structured around those 3 components. And then you can either view as a class in different differentiated groups, or you can actually look for each individual student to see how many activities are available for that student based on their scores. So if I, for example, click here for this class, I've just changed the names to just numbers so that they're de-identified for this purpose. And on here, you can see those codes I mentioned. So P1, P2, P3, P4. So for phonology, there are 4 categories. Being the components of spelling test for years 3 to 6, you'll find that there's a lot more to cover in terms of orthography and morphology. There's still certainly a lot of room for improvement and work on phonology in years 3 to 6. And in fact, my research has shown that even students in the 90th percentile in year 6 are still learning to develop their capacity to accurately spell or encode the medial parts or middle parts of polysyllabic words. So, and that's what P4 really targets actually. So you can see even if students have got full scores, say for P1, P2 and P3, I have developed some activities that you can print off that are labelled as extension tasks, and they align with the theme of the tasks align with what's provided as a support task for students who might be struggling with that concept. So for example, here for P1, we've got activity A as an extension for year 3 and this is a composite class, so year 3 and year 4 students are in here in this particular class. So an extension task for some students and then a support version of that task for students who need it. And in this case, there are 2 students. So I've got a little learning intention here. And in this case, it is I'm learning to segment words into syllables and phonemes as a strategy for spelling. And in particular, I'm learning to identify and spell words with a T phoneme. And I have the Australian curriculum and New South Wales syllabus links here. I will look to put Victorian links in the future, but I understand that curriculum or syllabus is currently still in revision stage or updates. So you can click on the activity and it tells you what sorts of things you can do. So if I click, for example, here, it opens up the PDF and then you can print it off. So although you may not want to print it off for the student or students, you might just refer to it as an example and then create a similar task if you wanted to, where the students can respond in their own workbooks if they wanted to. So there are, in some instances, very specific examples of words and instructional notes. And I've tried wherever possible to integrate some sentence level writing to some of these tasks, because I think it's often that transfer that students are not getting enough practice and then they may not demonstrate that they're able to transfer that knowledge into a range of writing contexts. So there are opportunities for some of those sort of integrated tasks. And wherever applicable, I've got some instructional notes, including some answers. So some of the tasks are specific to particular words or particular texts. Others might be more related to, others might be related more to, more open-ended kind of tasks. It really does depend on what the students need at that particular point in time. So I'll share with you a couple more examples. And so for example, if I go here and click where it says orthography, you'll see in orthography, there are 14 categories. Most of these relate to the graphemes for different vowel phonemes. Not all of them, but most of them do. So, you can click here on each of these and you can see the extent of all the different activities that are available. So for example, for O1 relates to words that have the long I phoneme and the different graphemes for long I. So the way I've structured these orthographic tasks are, you've got activity group A as a consolidation and extension task. So these students can be put into that group and have that activity. But then where applicable, I might have the same sort of task, but as a support task, support and consolidation rather than consolidation and extension. So these students would benefit from this task. So it's similar, but it's an easier version of that task with a bit more scaffolding. And again, I've got the curriculum links and the learning intentions. So I've got that kind of structure for all of these. And I've also tried to integrate a bit of words that are specific to certain grammar concepts, so that there's potential to link this with other areas like morphology and even sentence level writing. So, for example, activity B includes verbs that have long I. So then you could, even though you are focusing on an orthographic task in this particular activity, looking at graphemes for long I, those words are verbs. And then in another lesson, you can actually teach the suffix, ing, for example, using those same words. So the students get the opportunity to practice, and that's spaced and also massed learning over a few days. So you've got access to all of these. Every class is going to be a little bit different, but there's always going to be a scope for, whole class teaching, but that level of differentiation as you need to. So if I click on O4, for example, this is looking at graphemes for long O. And so in this case, there's only one student in year 3, in this year 3-4 class, that would benefit from this particular activity as a consolidation and an extension task. There are a couple of year 4 students as well who would benefit from that sort of task. But then I've got some students who are in the same class would be better suited to a support and consolidation version of that task. So if I show you, I'll click here as an example. And this is like the what I generally have done is, if it's an easier like support consolidation task, you'll probably see less words. Maybe some of the words might not be as complex. They might not be as long, like, they might just be 1 or 2 syllable words, maybe less graphemes as well. So the cognitive load is a little bit more controlled to support the students. Definition. So here is an example where I'm asking the students to use some of those words that they've sorted by grapheme and use them in sentence level writing contexts. For those of you who are familiar with the New South Wales syllabus, you'll see that, there is this language like, students need to learn how to write these different types of sentences. So I've integrated some of that into these tasks. And again, there are instructional notes. So how would you use these words? I guess prime the students in a different lesson where you can focus on the phonology of the words first. And then in another lesson, focusing on orthography, looking at the graphemes for long O with the various activities. I've got example sentences that you might use when you're modelling and demonstrating. And then some suggestions for where to next if you were to take this task as a morphological lesson in another lesson. And so that's kind of the easy version for that particular concept based on the scores. So if a student scores lower or shows no knowledge for that category, they might be given that particular task. And then if I have the same sort of thing again, but for the extension task, that would look different once again. So I'll just going to share the screen again so you can see. So if I've just shown you this one here. If I go to activity A, but now as, so that was consolidation and extension. If I go to, I think that's the one I showed you, support and consolidation. If I go to consolidation and extension, I'll show you what that one looks like. It's similar, but you'll see it is clearly much more complex because there are more graphemes. The task might be a bit more different. Some might be the same, some might be different. And so in some cases, I've got quite a few different activities. I think then that way the student has lots of opportunity to practice writing those words multiple times, but in different contexts. So it's not like, look, say, cover, write, check. It's still repetition, but repetition in different ways. So applying those words in different kinds of ways and different contexts. And it's through that repetition that students will benefit from their learning. So then, of course, I've got some instructional notes and answers and example sentences, further templates you might use for little extra consolidation games and so on. So that's basically how this whole platform works. The idea is that, well, most schools use the components of spelling test and assess the students at the start of the year, so in term 1, although I do have some schools who prefer to assess in term 4. So when you assess the students in term 1, you can then have access to all of these resources for a whole school year. Although I've spoken to my IT expert who has helped me put all of this together. What will happen with those schools who do assess using the CoST in term 4. So it will be possible to if I, on request, I guess, receive the following year class lists, I can re-upload the analysis report, and then you'll have access to the same set of resources, but for the following year's classes, so that the teachers can, go ahead and start planning their instruction. So the idea is that it's flexible, but still provides more scaffolding and support for teachers who I know are really busy. I know, I've created these all myself, and I know how time consuming they are to create them. And it took a lot of time and thought to work out what sorts of activities would work for certain students at certain year levels. And there's a real skill in doing that. And so I'm really happy to be able to share this in the hope that it will make the lives of teachers a little bit easier, and most importantly, that it will improve student outcomes, because we know that spelling is a very important literacy skill that we need to support students for the purposes of getting them to read and to write, and thus learn across different subject areas. So it's going to be quite accessible in terms of cost. Once the school if the school already has the manual and the online test itself, then accessing this whole platform for a whole school year is only $55 for a class. So I do want it to be reasonable and accessible. I want schools to use it. And so I've pitched it at a price that is, hopefully within the school's budgets. So I think I've covered the essential elements of what I wanted to cover, and I do open up to any questions that you might have. So feel free to ask any questions if they come up now. So over to you. Feel free to show your face or pop your question in the chat as well. Hi there.
Hi. Can I say what an outstanding body of work? Congratulations. It's just so impressive
Thank you.
what you've put together. And I don't think, if a school said they didn't know what to do with spelling after that, I think really they're not in a position to be doing it. So thank you. On behalf of teachers, thank you for
it's my pleasure.
there.
It's my pleasure. I really appreciate that feedback. And I can also see that there's always more for me to do on that platform. It's only the beginning, I think. So one idea I have in my mind is in the future, I'll just keep adding more and more, including potentially like maybe audio files where I can have either myself or someone actually sounding out the words and demonstrating some of the answers, because you can put it on paper, but if you can't hear someone explain something, it may still be a bit of a challenge for some. So I think there's always scope for me to keep building on it, which is exciting for me. It's my little big baby that I keep developing. Yeah.
And I apologize, I put the question in the chat about extension before you actually spoke about it. So
okay.
It's great that you can use it at all ends of the scale. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. And Nicole's posted a question: is there a post-test element of the CoST, or just redoing tests? Yeah, good question. Because it is one set of 70 words, I am very conscious of over testing, because as you know, if students become too familiar with the test words, then it will undermine the validity of the testing results. So and also it is quite a detailed, comprehensive test. So it's not like the kind of assessment you use for ongoing assessment and frequent assessment. So I would suggest you use it once a year, And you can still then track longitudinal progress over a year. And some schools do use the pseudo word components and spelling test, which is in the appendix to this manual at the back, as a follow-up, maybe mid-year assessment. And I have a version for year 3 and 4 students, and a version for 5 and 6 students. Unfortunately, I don't have the online version for the pseudo word assessment. I have tried to create it, but it's still not 100% accurate in its error analysis. So I'm not releasing it in that state. So it is a manual process. But often a lot of these activities that I have included can serve as informal check-ins, I guess, as you go along. So the assessments that you might, implement throughout the course of the year might not even feel like a test to the students. They're your observations of whether they're actually demonstrating what you're teaching in a range of different writing contexts. And I think that's also a valid form of assessment. It's more of an authentic kind of assessment. But yeah, so the test, I think once a year would be best, so that the students don't become too familiar with the words. Yes, so that's right. So the question is the online platform cost included in the $55 test cost? So it's $55 to do the online test, and then you get the Excel analysis report. And then if you wanted to access all of these printable activities, then that's another $55 for a class. So if you wanted both, it's $110 for the year. Justine, I do a lot of professional learning with schools, and since COVID, so much of that has been online, but I do also face-to-face. I much prefer face-to-face. So I haven't, got any specific training other than on my website. I do have some courses and workshops that I advertise. So I've only just recently done one. And next year I'll be running a few online via Zoom. They're not specific to this necessarily. I do make references to the components of spelling test and error analysis and all of that, but they're more about building content knowledge, thinking about lesson planning, explicit teaching, structuring lessons. So I can provide training directly to schools on request, in addition to what I already offer. And if you wanted to get in touch with me, just send me an email, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you on that. I've had some high school students using this test as well. Not as many. I think the schools that have reached out to me, they're not mainstream, English classroom teachers. They might be learning support sort of specialists in high schools who want some sort of assessment data and support for their students. And I would really love the opportunity to, in the future, trial this with, maybe year 7 students in the high school years, and, as an intervention study to see what works best for students in year 7, because my research has shown that all students in year 6, even those in the 90th percentile, are finishing primary school with still quite a lot to learn about spelling. Yet they go into high school and spelling isn't really taught. There's this assumption that they're already good spellers, and if they're not, well, good luck, too bad, which is not the right attitude to have. And, we know that there is research that suggests that students who are good at spelling tend to write more, tend to use a broader range of words in their writing. I'm sure it supports their reading skills as well. So I think it's worth investing time and energy into supporting students, even in year 7, maybe year 8. And there are ways we can do that integrate the teaching of vocabulary in different key learning areas. So it's something I'd love to be able to pursue, and that might be something we can explore in the future, perhaps in the role that I'm at, working at La Trobe University now, so as an adjunct associate professor. And Tanya Seri is here as well. Thank you so much for joining me, Tanya. Really appreciate your time. So I think I'll end the session unless there are any other further questions. But once again, thank you so much for taking the time to join me this afternoon. If you wanted to find out anything more about this project, feel free to email me, and it will become available on my website closer to the end of the school year for implementation at the start of 2024. So look out for that on my website. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a nice afternoon. Bye-bye.